All right, we're pushing over now. All right, welcome everyone. Good evening. This is our fourth episode, Hampton Roads Youth Foundation, 757 Roundtable Talk. Carl and I had a vision many years ago to start doing some football camps and doing some outreach in the local 757 community. We're excited about some of the guests that we have tonight with Mayor Tuck for the city of Hampton, who's been really supportive of some of our efforts over the years. And we've had some very specific conversations around youth partnering in the city of Hampton that we started to explore. Councilman Harris, who's been with us for many years as a coach, as an activist and community leader, and some perspectives there. And then Coach Reamon, we can't say enough about, who was the first one to do a camp in the area to bring back professional athletes to talk about guidance and, not just on the field things, but off the field. So many of the things that he did years ago, being a native of Newport and now coaching with the Landstown Eagles. I mean, there's a prospective coach that you provide for us, literally 757. I mean, you talk to coaches every day. Although our audience from an HRYF perspective has been youth, young adults, and student athletes, I think the conversation we want to have today around some actionable things that we could put in place for all of us collectively, things that the city of Hampton's doing, what Newport News is also doing with policing, community involvement programs. We want to delve into some of those because we want to kind of get you to kick things off. I think you've got an interesting perspective over the years. Having grown up and seen a lot, you've been coaching 30 plus years. I know a lot of your current students and past students have been reaching out to you and looking for answers and a perspective and some guidance. But could you just kind of kick us off and maybe kind of set the tone for us in terms of how you're seeing maybe things that have transpired and taken place today?
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. How I want to start it is Hampton Roads Youth Foundation represents nearly 60 years, guys, plus of the 757 area. Okay, and I'm humbled to stand here and talk to you because all of you are leaders and you that way through some guidance. And I'm proud to be a part of it. If you can bear with me, the Hampton Roads Youth Foundation is to develop and make and manage programs which can help kids and at-risk kids in the community, and you do just that. And about 60 years ago or less, we started doing just that. And I want not to embarrass anyone, but the first person I think of that helped me start the Hampton Roads Youth Foundation, the words no, but the objectives was Vernon Lee, your father. I was in high school, I was in middle school. He was my mentor. He was my guidance. He was my goal because I wanted to do what he did. He wore number 21. I know you knew that. I left high school with number 21, college 21, pro football 21. And he was the first of those major people that influenced my life that represents what Hampton Roads Youth Foundation represents. Carl Francis, I went to high school with your mom and your daddy. That they represent you. And at that time, they were great people, period. So naturally, you were going to be who you are. And then the next one, lo and behold, some of the things we're going through today, dealing with the virus and the unrest. There was a powerful civics rights leader named Marcellus Harris, the best in the country. He changed my life as a young guy because I thought I was a hot stuff in athletics, but I ran into him when I came home and or grew up around. Marcellus Harris, Reverend Harris, a major activist for all the rights we still going through, guys. We are still experiencing it today. And that's why to come with you and have an audience, we can have something in common because we still have the child at heart. Because look at the change that's going on. Those who are protesting, there's a younger group out there. And so, with saying that about Reverend Marcellus Harris, his son Marcellus, who became my player, and he became a great football player to then go on to East Carolina, and there's a story with him, and who was also our city councilman, and I'm proud to see that. But that story part puts him out there with all the great ones. He had a quarterback named Aaron Brooks in front of him.
Right.
He was the quarterback. And then there was a guy named Michael Vick after him. And we had the scholarship to him to college. And I told his daddy, who was a major activist, we're going to scholarship him. But it won't be at that quarterback position. It'll be an athlete. And so I am so proud of you, Marcellus, for who you are and who you developed to be because you had good guidance. And so basically that's all we're talking about here is the products of the Hampton Roads Foundation or the so-called what do we do with our children. And yes, Mayor Tuck, I'm very, very much familiar with you. And I don't have a personal story, but that's a good thing. But I do have some people who are very close to you and you love yourself, the Watsons. And so, guys, I just wanted to get that in there because it really represents a long time of things that people have to do from different backgrounds. And I want to read something and then I'm going to kind of shut up and move it on a little bit, if you don't mind. Vernon. I wrote a book called Rough Diamonds, A Coach's Journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it pretty much talks about the things that I just kind of ran around in my delivery. And in Rough Diamonds, you all are in it anyway, because we represent the same thing. But here I'm gonna read real fast and then I'm gonna move it on. Our role models growing up were the men of our community. That's you. The family, teachers, doctors, ministers, church, and local athletic heroes. And Hampton was you just had a couple of those athletes on the last few weeks. So you bring them back just to touch. They were conscious of how they lived their lives, what they said and did in front of kids in the neighborhood. They took responsibility not just for their own kids, but for the neighbors' kids too. As a coach, we know that part of their job is to set an example. In fact, it is the responsibility of every adult to be a role model to children he or she comes in contact with. Because sports stars are heroes, are adults also, they share in that responsibility. However, it is not their job alone. This old thing, African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. You're part of the village. You are part of that village that we talk about for 60 years. But now, look what's going on out here today. We are now being called back, come, work, because they need help. Then it says the media is now part of our village, but it is up to the parents and us to decide on how much of media is healthy. Children who don't have healthy role models at home must receive support from the community, you and our community. And I thank you for continuing to carry it on in the fashion that you do. And so I want to just say that little bit before moving on, and you can blend me in a way in your chat as you choose. But I needed to pinpoint each one of you and what this foundation represents at this most critical time, because there's a now we're requesting your participation more. Okay, so sports is a metaphor. We know that, and everything we learn from it, get from it, makes us better human beings. All of us are athletes, and we know just that. So, all right, I blend right on in as we go. But thank you for just hearing that much.
No, we appreciate that, Coach. Mayor Tuck, we've had conversations and this question is both for you and Councilman Harris. So if we could start with you, Mayor Tuck, can you just, what is the state of the relationship with the police department? Like, there's some perceptions out there, there's some reality. Could you just kind of give us maybe a state of affairs from your perspective and where you sit? Are you gonna mute, Mayor?
You got it.
First of all, thank you for having me on. And secondly, what I've tried in perhaps the last 2 weeks and through a number of Facebook Live conversations and trying to think even of our council meeting about 2 weeks ago, is to try and stress to our residents and anybody else who's tuning in, is that Hampton is different from most cities. Our police, the leadership of our police department, we have three assistant chiefs who are African-American. We go back to the 1980s of having implemented community-oriented policing. A lot of people talk about it now, but it's an old concept in our city. But we prior to President Obama coming out with his 21st century recommendations, we had established about 80% of those. So the whole thing of the training of implicit, explicit bias, of body-worn cameras, almost all our patrol officers have them. We do a number of things to make sure that our officers recognize that their role is as guardians, not as warriors. And we have a number of different task forces and responsibilities within our police department where they're supposed to be out engaging with the community, going to civic league meetings and just doing all those positive things. And as far as the instances of brutality, misconduct, police involved shooting, I think our last police involved shooting was about 7 years ago. And so what I try to stress is that we don't believe that the things that have happened in other localities would happen in Hampton because of training, because of processes we have in place, because we hold our officers accountable. And we also have an African-American Commonwealth attorney who does not play. So just that whole, all those things, those factors are such that we think we're ahead of a lot of other communities now. We're going to look at, and we do have a police advisory group that talks about policing and techniques and things like that. But we're also going to make sure that we review our use of force when we use tear gas and things of that nature. But again, I think that in Hampton, our police force recognizes that they are part of the community, that there's not an adversarial relationship. And that speaks well of our police department, our community.
Thank you. Councilman Harris, could you give us your perspective?
Yes, and thank you all
for
for inviting me to be a part of the conversation. I just wanted to share real quick, as Coach Reamon was talking, you know, as he shared, I was one of his student athletes in high school. And I don't know if you saw, or if you can see me while he was speaking, I was sitting here at his attention like I was back in high school, because he commands that respect, even at this stage in my life, and all that he's inspired me throughout the course of time. So I'm glad and honored to be on a panel with you guys, with my high school coach and Mayor Tuck. But just to answer your question, I do echo some of the same sentiments as Mayor Tuck has shared, as we are in a unique position Hampton and Newport News. We could, some probably are, some people sometimes are in Hampton and think they're in Newport News and vice versa. That's how we intertwine so much geographically. However, in 2018, we were able to bring along a police chief and Steve Drew, who came with the concept of community policing, and he took it to a higher level with a lot of the initiatives that he brought to the community, and which has been embraced by the community. We have community walks in which a large part of his background is being transparent and building a bridge of trust between the community and the law enforcement. Are we perfect? No, we're not perfect. We still have challenges that we are trying to overcome. However, but that community bridge and model that he has put in place has been beneficial. He's always looking to be a part of a community activity. I mean, he's out and about more than anybody else I see in when I attend some of the events. But what he's brought a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, in which we have a lot of our law enforcement officers have a Saturday basketball league in which they are able to team up, play basketball, talk about community challenges, and try to be able to break down any barriers that were there prior to that. We also have a citizens review board, but one of the things, and I'll be talking with our city manager in the upcoming week, how we can make that even better. I feel that it could be better in regards to the protocols and the policy that's in place right now, because I think that's going to be beneficial for us moving forward. Also along those lines, Chief Drew has brought in some initiatives in regards to training. We have an anti-bias training that's taking place with every member of the law enforcement. And then to take it a level higher, we're also having some mental health trainings for the officers so that they could be in the know in regards to the mental health challenges that are in our communities, not just the lower income, but even the higher income communities. We have an autistic guide, in which what we're doing now is we giving residents an opportunity to register any family members that are autistic. So just in case a situation does occur and the officer has to be called, they will recognize that that citizen has autism. And it's a different way, obviously, in which you would have communication or understanding when you may have to cross paths. So there's a lot of initiatives that Chief Drew has brought to the department since 2018. But as we said, we still have things we need to work on when we look at what's going on nationwide, and just making sure that we are building that relationship to make it even better between our citizens and our officers, because that's ultimately what we want to have. And one of the things I also like about what's going forward, we've had people in the city that's been protesting peacefully, and what I like is that Chief Drew's been out there for the rallies and opening himself up to hear from our residents here in the city of Newport News. There was one last Sunday, as a matter of fact, right there in the parking lot of the dump, not a dump area, the furniture outlet, the dump, in which we had a rally, and Chief Drew and Chief Stalk from Hampton showed up together, in which they were able to field questions and just be that open ear to the community and hear the residents. Because the most important thing right now is to hear. And the more we can have those avenues in which we can hear from one another, that's going to be a blessing for all of us moving forward. So, I mean, there's some things that are in place, but there's some things that we still have to tighten the screws on in order for it to be a cohesive community amongst our law enforcement and residents.
One of the things I wanted to talk to Coach Reamon about is one of the things that Vernon and I have done over the past 24 years is something that you've done maybe over the past 50 years, and in terms of developing young men, and being that a lot of the young men that you've served in your career, since you actually moved back from the area from your playing career, has been exposed to our law enforcement officers. They've had family members who have been exposed. As you have developed young men like Councilman Harris and others that we all know, how have you been able to guide them through their life, high school, academics, athletics, and guide them to become young men that you have always hoped for? Because I've always believed you never know what type of coach you were until your young men finish playing sports 10 years after you've had them, right? And so what tools did you use? What information did you use to help get them through that process of interaction with law enforcement and guiding their way through tough communities to become productive citizens?
Well, I first want to say, to respond to that, is you always have parents and hope that children have parents or adults around that can help guide. Then when they come through the education system, the school, the community, then you're talking about developing a relationship. You have to get that relationship. Either way you look at it, there's nowhere around it, because you can't, not unless they know who you are, what you represent, they're not going to hear you. And so I think the energy has to come from always the teacher. And the teacher is mom and dad, the adults they're around. It comes from them putting those particular ideas in their head that you don't do this, you don't do that. And, you know, it may sound like a broken record, but hey, it has not changed. It's the guidance of the adults over the child, and which you said they believe or they know love and care is there. So I never know what's going to come about. I always tell ninth graders, I said, man, I don't even know you yet. I just know you are God's child. So let's get it started. And then the Reamon side comes out, but it's about relationship bonding. And that does not change, because we all want to be cared for. And that's what kids today. And just like I go back to that group that's out there now protesting or in the so-called view, they're the so-called 9/11 age group of people almost. No offense to that. And they have certain ideals. Well, we still got to be leaders to then calm them down or help guide them. Okay, we do have to do that. So I can look at the kids, you know, that I've touched, and good, bad, or ugly. You know, you have to work with them, and you pray that when you finish, hoping you never finish, but when they walk away from you, leave you, then they're doing great things for their life.
Can I just add to that, brother Frank, brother Carl, and
yes,
absolutely, absolutely.
Coach Raymond's being real modest and humble right now, but I'm one of the ones that has experienced what he's done throughout the course of time. You know, he was my coach at Ferguson High School. Prior to that, he was over in Portsmouth coaching and came to us. But Coach Reamon goes to the communities that most educators at that time would not go into. Coach Reamon would go to some of my teammates' homes that teachers and some other coaches would shy away from. And like you said, he would build a relationship with those young men. And once he built that relationship with them, I heard him say the Reamon side would come out. Do you know when the Reamon side come out, that's that fatherhood side that would let you know when you're not doing the right thing. And Coach Reamon has his way of letting you know when you're not doing the right thing. But it was all out of love. And like I said, I wouldn't be here. I know he taught about my father, but I wanted to be like a Coach Reamon. I coach football as well. I'm in education, but that's because of the influence that he's had, and I've seen him have over other young men and women. I mean, hope I don't get him in trouble, but and I know he's probably cringing I'm saying this now, but we would go to Coach Raymond's house, we would have food, and he would get young people out of troubling circumstances, troubling environments, and hold his arms around them and allow them to reach that potential that he saw in each and every one of those young men that he coached and educated. So he's, like I said, he's being modest, but I've been able to witness the relationship that he's built. And to this day, like I told you before, when he talks, I'm like I'm back in high school. I'm at attention because of that respect and that relationship that he's had with me, and he's had with thousands of other young men just such as myself. And that's what it takes when you get into this field of education, when you get into this realm of coaching. This is what helps young people stay online. And that's why a large part of what I do as a council member, I try to streamline some of the processes for our Parks and Recreational department in order for those coaches that are volunteering their time, energy, effort to be able to provide those opportunities for them to wrap their arms around young people and keep them on the straight and narrow, whether it's a sport that they love to do, or whether it's a one of our art programs, music programs, because all these things go in line with being able to be academic, to do well academically. And like I said, I've seen that as a witness to Coach Reamon's time as a coach and educator.
Excuse me, before we leave this point, and I would like to pick up on what Coach Reamon said about, and I think it comes down to community. I generally give about one speech a year and a whole bunch of welcome to Hampton to different groups. But the time that I have to speak maybe to community groups, and particularly to individuals in school, whether it's middle school or high school, I talk about community. And I talk about the fact that I believe we've lost that sense of community. Now, I can remember where I grew up, and I probably knew all the families. Chapel Hill is very small, but I probably knew all the families within about 3 blocks of my house, and they probably knew me. When I moved to where I currently live, and I've been living here since 2002 in Hampton, I probably knew almost all the families on my street. It's a cul-de-sac. Probably knew all the people who live here with the exception maybe of 4 houses. Now, what, 18 years later, I can tell you I know the neighbor on my right because the one on the left moved. I don't know the one on the other side of him, and maybe 2 houses down, I know that family by face and name. I know so few. So I know maybe 3 people on my street now. Okay, and we're talking about 24 houses. So I now probably know about 4 of the families on my street. And in many communities, and I could say, people want to talk about when you grew up, the person down the street or whatever could whip you. Well, that didn't happen because my parents insisted on our behaving properly, so that the only reports came to our house was that you have some well-mannered children. But nowadays, you don't have those structures of a Coach Reamon who can go and will go to a family's house and sit and talk. And a lot of those structures, the backbones of those communities, are older individuals who have either died or they become infirmed, and you don't have individuals who have come behind them, either because they just weren't interested or weren't engaged and didn't get the training or whatever. So that's what we've got to strive for. And so we're trying to really do a lot of healing and rebuilding of communities. We've lost it. And that's the challenge for us, I think, in our communities, is to rebuild those communities. And so certainly through individuals like Coach Reamon and hopefully there are others like him. Chapel Hill only had maybe 12,000 individuals, and then you had the university had maybe another 16 or 17,000. So we were small, only 1 high school. And before total integration, we had this one Black coach who coached all the sports at the Black high school, and everybody did with him. He was a force in the community. But I don't know if outside of that, in larger communities, if you still have the same individuals who command the same respect, who will go to a student's house or athlete's house or whatever and establish that relationship. And that's what we've got to get back to, is those relationships and sense of community.
So following that theme of around engaging communities and connecting communities, Mayor Tuck and Councilman Harris, you both mentioned specific examples of some task force, some commissions and initiatives that are currently taking place. And as we're talking about youth in particular, and young adults and the parents and everyone that surrounds them, right? They're now wondering like, okay, how do I get involved? And again, being on the front lines and protesting, you know, we got to think about some actionable plans to come right after that. And I know that there's some things that both municipalities already have in place, and you mentioned a couple of those. Can you give some examples of how do our youth, and when I say youth, I'm kind of thinking high school, maybe college, but it's applicable to everyone, obviously. But how do they get involved around some of those commissions or task force? Like, could you give some examples and like just walk us through it? Like, what does that really mean? Because I think a lot of people may hear about those things, but what does it mean to serve on a commission or a task force? You get nominated? Do you send in an email? Like, how does that actually work?
Well,
I'm gonna yield.
oh, you go ahead, man. You go ahead, man.
No, I was gonna yield to you. Go ahead.
Oh, well, it's interesting you asked that question, because just the other day I put a post up on Facebook in regards to people inquiring about how can I become more active, how can I become more engaged in our local government. And what I put up was we have over 45 boards, commissions, committees that citizens can serve on that have direct impacts on various realms of what takes place in Newport News, as I'm sure Hampton has as well. And what you can do is, I put the link, there's a link that you can go on to. You can call the city clerk's office, and you could get yourself registered into the list of names that we go through quarterly. And as city council members, what we do, we look at the nominations of the candidates, and we will approve and vote on who we feel would be the best fit those needs. And the reason why I put that up, because where we are, a lot of times it's the same old names that we get on those lists. It's names that go back 10, 20 years for people who filled out those board applications. And it's been lately, the last couple of years, that we've had some new names that have been come across the table. But we want, from my perspective, I can't speak for all of the other council members, but I would love to see a list of a bunch of new people who have so many wonderful ideas, thoughts, perspectives, so that we could somewhat shift our way of thinking in regards to some of the direction that we may be looking to go towards in certain endeavors in the city. And once those applications are on board, we could get more information. You could have people write recommendation letters on your behalf, get those sent in. I would contact a city council member, let them know your interest, let them know your background, so that we could speak on behalf of you serving on some of those boards. And that's one of the ways that you could get actively engaged in city government in your local, in your city.
I want to go in a different direction, because I think part of what we're talking about is youth and young adults and their awareness now of what's going on with respect to policing and the folks who make the decisions about their lives, that impact their life, as well as policing decisions. And so, one, we have a youth commission that takes representatives from the different high schools, and they have, actually, I was surprised, they meet more often than the council meeting. They meet like 3 times a month, first Monday, second Monday, third Monday. But part of the challenge there, I think, is those are the good kids. Those are when you expect to be involved in things. Then you have your athletic-minded and academic-minded kids, and they're involved in the other school-oriented things. Then you got the others, and those are the ones that are the challenge that we need to reach. And so one of the things that, and I'm sure Councilman Harris is aware of it, because Newport News is a member of this group called Cities United, but there's a group, again, Cities United, that came together. I think it formed back in 2013 with the former mayor, Michael Nutter from Philadelphia. And there's a former mayor from New Orleans, and I'm gonna mess up his name if I try and call it, so I won't. But at the time, they realized that every 24 hours, we were losing 14 Black males between the ages of 14 and 24 to homicides. And so they came together with a goal of trying to reduce that number by 50% by 2025. So there are like 140 some mayors who are involved in that organization across the country. We recognize that when you look at the statistics of homicides and individuals who are involved in gun violence in our city, and perhaps probably the same with Newport News because the data is across the country, that the majority of the victims are Black males in that cohort, and the majority of the perpetrators are Black males in that cohort. So one of the things that we're trying to do in Hampton is to reach out to that group, meeting them where they are. And we've engaged some nonprofits that are actually led by former gang leaders and individuals who were formerly incarcerated. We've also brought young people, and we've said, okay, look, as a city, we have resources. We have dollars, we have ideas sometimes, but we don't have the bodies or all the programs or strategies. So we want you to partner with us so that we can have that dialogue, so we can come up with constructive programs and strategies to try and reduce that number. Because what I've shared is that that young Black male whose life is taken had potential, or may have been on his way to reaching some of that potential. But at nothing else was somebody's son, somebody's brother, possibly somebody's father, somebody's cousin, nephew, you name it. That person meant something to somebody. And so we need to try and make sure as best we can that we impact that. And part of it, people think that city leaders are distant, that they're way up here and you can't get to them. I go to a lot of places. Now, I'm not as engaged in certain areas as I would like to be. And so I've even approached some of the folks who, again, who walk the streets and they've led gangs. And I've said, okay, look, you tell me where to come to, and I'll do my best to come there and talk to individuals, because I want them to see me as somebody who's accessible, somebody who, you know, my life, you see it now as Mayor Tuck, but you don't know where I've come from, and I can share my story with you. And I think all of us have stories. And what I've again told people in different settings is that when you're in the room with an adult, ask that person to tell you his or her story, because I think they can share something with you that might help you either to reach a career goal, or might steer you around an obstacle or something you're bound to face. And so I think those are the positive things that we can try and do. And so, again, I know a lot of folks are protesting, and I was walking with some protesters last Tuesday evening prior to the demonstration that we had, and which later led into a riot and looting. But I was asking them, so well, why are you out here? Well, we want to protest police brutality and what the government said. I said, well, I'm the mayor. You can talk to me. And they didn't realize that, hey, here I am walking beside them. And I want them to see me as that, as somebody who, hey, I'm willing to talk to you. I'll meet you wherever you want. And I want to know what your concerns are and what are the things you see in our city that prevents you from being perhaps all that you can be through this first experience of 12th grade and then anything else. Let me know. And I think that's the attitude in Newport News as well.
Yes, and just a couple of things that Mayor Tuck alluded to. We have the Mayor's Youth Commission, who, like Mayor Tuck said, they meet quite frequently, and and they have a lot of initiatives that they are implementing as well. Because as I was able to be a part of some small commencement ceremonies, some small gatherings of commencement ceremonies recently, the young people, they are becoming more activated by the things that they are witnessing, by the things that they are hearing. And what I would hate for it to happen is them to just get activated for a moment and then just let things simmer down. I wonder, while they're activated, we have to give them opportunities to be engaged and stay and remain engaged, because that's how we move forward. We have phenomenal mentoring programs that are taking places in communities that need them the most. And it's up in the elected seats that we sit in. It is up to us to find ways to find resources for those programs to be able to be as effective and as efficient as they possibly can with the communities that they serve. And so as we move forward, I mean, that's what we have to look at, being sure that we are doing all we can to effectively provide for them. Because when we get out of this COVID-19 and we get out of the unrest that we're dealing with, we have to find ways to ensure that our communities that have been impacted the most have the resources they need to be able to have those equitable outcomes that we're going to be looking for.
Councilman Harris, I have a question for you.
Yes.
You sit in a very unique position because not only are now you a city official, a leader in the city of Newport News, but you also have been a part of this group of young men that Mayor Tuck mentioned, where you have your academias, you have your athletes, and then you have your group of young men who are trying to find their way, right? In your position as the councilman of the city of Newport News, when you've had those conversations with those young men that you have been in locker rooms with, when you were in high school, when you were a star football player at Ferguson, what have you seen that has been the disconnect for bridging that gap of those young men who may be in place of being a little lost, to connect them to hope that city programs provide, opportunities that the city, you mentioned all the programs, 45 groups or organizations that the city citizens can become involved in. What is the missing link that disconnects them from turning that corner and connecting with hope on the other side?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because that's something that I talk about with my partners who are coaches, educators, quite often. And when I'm answering is going to tell you, going to be something that you'll see, because when we see images like what we saw with George Floyd, perhaps, for instance, people don't understand the psychological effects that have on our brothers and sisters that look like us. This goes back to the days when the slave days, when they used to take the strongest brother in the quarters and do harmful things to psychologically keep them enslaved in hopes of not moving forward for what they would want to do in their lives. And when we see things, when we're getting shot in the street, whether it's law enforcement or even if it's in impoverished situations, it's a mental trauma that we are still trying to overcome. And then when you look at those incidences, is a trust. It's trust. How do we reestablish a sense of trust between those that are sworn in to protect and serve and the community in which we look at as a lens that they don't really want to protect and serve to an extent. So when I'm talking to my young guys, I try to expose them to different situations. We've been able to take college tours. We've been able I used to always have, when I was coaching at high school level, I would always take my guys out. We would have a mentorship group that they would go into elementary schools or middle schools and work with those younger kids that look like them, because high school athletes to an elementary student or middle school student is like a NBA or NFL player in their eyes, and allow them those opportunities to see how much they are valued, because like I said, when you see those things that impact your psychological awareness like that, then you may think you're not valued. You don't mean anything. Why should I have a sense of hope when I'm looking at somebody who is doing these things to people that look like me? So I would always have opportunities for them to know that they are somebody that people look up to, somebody that has a great deal within them, that we need to pull that potential out of them so that they can maximize it. So when we look at in my city, in the position that I sit now, it's been a blessing to be able to partner with Antoine Bethea and some of the things that he has in regards to wanting to have resources here in the city that could bring our communities together. You may have heard about what he's doing in regards to his foundation and the college tours, the building basketball courts, and there's some educational centers that he's looking at, initiatives that he's looking at putting in place as well. So when we are looking, and I'm talking to my group, I try to instill a sense of value into their lives so that we can pull that purpose out of them each and every day.
Can I follow on that question? All right, I played tennis in high school, so you'll probably consider me an athlete. But
You're an athlete.
we were state champions my senior year.
That's hard.
That counts.
But I've worked in college athletics at Howard University, and I worked in professional athletics at the Washington Redskins. But an observation, and Coach Reamon is probably close to my age, and so he probably grew up in that era where you didn't ask grown-ups a bunch of questions. So it wasn't until my father had died and I was doing research on Ancestry.com and realized that my father probably lost his father somewhere between the age of 7 and 10 or something like that, looking just at the census. But one of the things I observed about my father was that he always included my friends in different activities, whether it was going to the church picnic every summer, sometimes if we were just going to do an outing, or if he had an opportunity to help them make some money. And we didn't grow up, well off. Our father's job was 9 months a year at a cook at a fraternity house. So the other 3 months of the year, we washed windows, we waxed floors, we cut grass, we painted houses, we did almost anything that was honest and decent to tide us over. But he always involved those folks. Now, when I was working at Howard, and I was 24, wasn't married, swimming coach and I, who's like 1 year older than I, every Friday, every Saturday night, we were clubbing. All right, did it for like 2 years. Finally, I heard about Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and so I became a big brother to a 12-year-old boy. But what I see is this: most instances, when you're between 18 and 22, you're college. So you're having your fun. Yes, you're learning, but maybe you're joining your fraternity, but you're doing all these things. And most of them are selfish, but they're about you and your fun and your life and you're dating and all those other things. And then once you graduate, you're still beginning into your career, but it's still a lot about you. And maybe you're still hanging out with your fraternity buddies, or you're clubbing, or you're whatever, or maybe you're into your dating. Then you get married, and then you start settling down and you have your own family. And then, those kids grow up and they go away. And then you start saying, well, you're welcoming your grandchildren, or you say, well, I raised my children, now it's my time. Point I'm trying to make is individuals who could reach out and help provide guidance aren't necessarily doing it. That is the challenge. You think about the fatherless boys in our communities that could be inspired, that would look up to an athlete. And I know sometimes athletes do take time and give back as much as they can because their schedules are busy. But I don't know if we have enough of that. I can remember being in the 8th grade, and Charlie Scott was the first Black athlete at UNC. And I used to have a paper route twice a week, and he came through the newspaper room, and I said, Charlie Scott, and tore off a top of a rubber band box and walked over to him and asked for his autograph, which I probably never asked anybody else's autograph since that time. But it's just a fact that, hey, Charlie Scott, And we don't realize the impact that athletes have, but you have to be an athlete. You don't have to be a perfect person to reach out and help somebody. And I think that's the challenge right now, is that so many of our young boys need that guidance, and it doesn't come from somebody who has the structure in his life to make a difference. So they turn to the gangs because that's where they find the affirmation. That's where they find supposedly the love. That's where they find family. And so I think we've got to do more of that as responsible men, whether you're a coach, you're a teacher, you're a professional athlete, you're in the ministry, you pick whatever walk of life, you can reach back and try and help somebody positively. Now, I've been a foster parent twice in the last time I did it was up until 2007, but did it because I felt like there was an opportunity to help, again, a small boy. So we did it to the 3 small boys. Actually, Councilman Harris knows one of the kids, and we haven't talked about that. But all that said, those are things you've got to do to make a difference and an impact. So it's not just sitting up there and making laws. That's the easy part. It's really getting down in the trenches, and it's trying to encourage other people to do that. And so actually, we had tried to start a mentoring program. About 2 years ago, I brought together pastors and said, this is a Macedonian call. We want to do a local missions focus. And one of the things that came out of that was trying to mentor 100 boys starting in the 6th grade and following them through the 8th grade. Because back in the early 2000s, a former circuit court judge spoke to a men's breakfast and said, you can go into any middle school in our city, and there are teachers there who will tell you who are the kids who are most likely to wind up in the criminal justice system. And so one of the last opportunities you have to make an impact in a positive manner is in middle school. And so we were trying to find men to commit. And I used to always tell women, look, we're nothing against women, but a lot of these boys don't have a male role model. And we were trying to find 100. Now I don't think we had more than maybe 30. But that's the challenge. And so it was to make a 2.5-year commitment to see them all the way through middle school, because we thought once they got into high school and they got into the academy program, that they'd be on a better path or a better trajectory for success. But it's all those things that factor into it.
Coach Reamon, I have a question for you. You and I know this. Vernon and I played high school football, little league football. And one of the most interesting things that I think people don't understand is in that world of sport, the coach is the most influential figure in most every young person's world, okay? Whether it's a young lady, young male, even from the time that we start playing sports from 6 years old up, it's like Marcellus said, I've been in front of some of my coaches and I get chills and have to remind myself that I'm a grown man. Like I don't have to, freeze up, but that's that respect of a coach. Have you found that in your profession now that coaches have had the time to nurture, love, and build their players, young men from all races into better citizens and help it become just beyond athletics and become more Councilman Harrisons and others that are out there? Do you find that coaching profession has shifted in a way today than it was 30 years ago?
Well, again, I'm gonna protect myself. I've been around a long time, 30 years. So I've seen a change. I've seen life, as we all know, life changes and moves. There is a difference of those that coach that you all are describing in your description of who touches the child to help a village raise a child. It just depends on the structure, the discipline, or the security the coach has in themselves. Because many days now, we're not finding teachers as coaches. They are coming in and they have another job with another job, but yet they have to do the same things with the kids. So How do you find that they're going to get in that school building or get to that house at certain times, or have the same qualities that you just expressed that they have? So you don't know who has what. So you have to watch it, because America today, with that child, they want you to be the best relationship person, but you want to win a game and you want to get a scholarship. So all of those pieces come together, and it can be very confusing. And young coaches, no offense, B2 will tell you this, young coaches want to win and want to get scholarships. They want to do it all tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It takes longer than tomorrow to make a difference in a village. And so to just respond to you on that, yes, those that do it, those who have time to do it, you know, they're good at what they do in touching the life and having a relationship of the kids. But also along with that, and I close it on it, there's parents today that do not want you to have a major relationship with their child.
Mm.
Now that is a change that I see. Okay, so it's a common, it's human, all these are human relationship issues.
That's right. That's right. I totally agree.
You know, and so I can't solve all of the problems, but we can address them and speak of them, and pray that it all works out.
I think the interesting thing about some of this conversation is that part of the message is that this is complex. This is not I mean, the relationship building, the call to actions, the engagement and consistency around the programs. I think that's also a big takeaway that I'm getting from this, that we need to share with our community, with our friends and family. I mean, we talked about the mental aspect. I mean, there's a behavioral aspect, there's an economic, there's a social injustice piece that, you know, have happened for centuries. I mean, this is a very complex issue in terms of what we're trying to solve as we move forward, as we move beyond, you know, being in the streets and demanding justice and reforms. That this is going to take some time. It's going to be a marathon. And you know what? It's not going to be any TV cameras. It's not going to be on social media. It's going to be detailed, blocking and tackling, like hard, roll up the sleeves, trying to get more men out to be mentors, as Mayor Tuck talked about. One of the things, and it seems so basic, and Coach Reamon, I know, you know, going back to, you know, the Civil Rights Act in '64 and our ability to have the sacrifices that were made just to vote. That is such a basic thing that I think has gotten lost. And I would like, you know, Mayor Tuck and Councilman Harris to just talk about like why voting matters. And it just seems like that's a basic thing, but the way it influences budgets, and you talk about resourcing in different communities and legislative agendas. I mean, as mayor, I know you have, but how does that voting piece and what is it? Because people have, I think, got despondent in some ways about, oh, my vote won't count.
Well, let me offer, first of all, in Hampton, everyone runs at large. So it's a little bit different when you talk about where resources go. But at the same time, you need to try and ensure, I mean, there was one time on council, I think, where of the 7 members, not including the mayor, well, including the mayor, but I think 4 of them were from one side of town, from the same side of town. So who's representing the other group? And so I think what you have to do, first of all, even though there is voter suppression, we've always been good at knowing the game and then developing the strategy so we can still play the game and come out ahead. So if it's got to be a particular type of ID, if elections, and of course in Virginia, you have election every year of some type, but if your congressional elections are every 2 years and your presidential elections are every 4 years, you've got time to learn the rules of the game and make sure that you are registered, that you have the proper ID, that if they're going to mail something to your house and determine that whether or not you still live there, that you get that thing and you send it back, play the game. But that's one part of it. The other part is that, again, you need to vote because when you talk about either mass incarceration strategies, it's the person who's your Commonwealth attorney in Virginia, district attorney in other states, who decides how you're going to prosecute a case and how much time you're going to ask for on that case. Judges in Virginia are appointed by your representatives in the General Assembly. So if you don't have a representative in the General Assembly who thinks like you or who values your vote, then that person doesn't necessarily have to think about who you might want to sit on that bench. Juries come from people who are registered to vote. I shared the other day when I used to be out on the street trying to collect signatures, I'd approach people and they say, oh, no, I'm not registered. I have to worry about jury duty. Well, that's a civic responsibility. And again, if you talk about the fact that we have so many Black men, young and older, who are incarcerated, it's because of a jury that may not look like them decided that, hey, this person's life is expendable. And so they sentence them to the maximum. It's those people in the General Assembly who determine what the minimum maximums are for certain crimes and how much time you get based on that offense, or whether 1 gram of marijuana or 1 gram of cocaine is equal to, or 1 gram of, I guess, what is that? What's the other thing everybody does now? Can't remember. All right.
I don't.
Yeah, what was that? The thing that it hurt the Black community back in the 90s? It was crack. Yeah,
Crack.
yeah. Crack was equal to whatever grams of powder cocaine.
Cocaine. Right, yeah.
Yeah, so none of us know that, so we couldn't remember. Okay, but those kinds of discrepancies are the things that are determined by people voting, and that's why it's important. And locally, it's funding that goes to schools, and if you're in a situation where you have voting by districts, then yeah, it's whether or not your school, your district gets a particular school or a resource, a recreation center or a library, whatever the service is, or the number of police officers that patrol your area. All those things come with voting.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Mayor Tuck shared, because he hit on a lot of solid points and why it's significant that people participate in the voting process. But also, knowing your local elections, just knowing who your city council members are. I mean, we just had an election a few weeks ago. Even though we had a slight increase in people who participated, which to some was a surprise due to everything that was going on, it's still a drastically lower number than the people that are registered to vote in local elections. And why that's so important, because these local elections, these people that are such as myself and other city council members, we sit down and develop budgets that impact the lives of the citizens more so than anything else. And you need to know where the people that you're voting for and their priorities are. And along those lines as well, participating in the census. That's a very important thing in regards to funding that'll be allocated to our localities. And right now, I think we were like at Newport News, last number I got was like about 60%. We still have a large number that's not being represented in the census, which is it happens every 10 years. And I think from what I have heard, Mayor Price of Mayor Newport News and Mayor Tuck have a little challenge going on that Mayor Tuck can talk about. But these things are important because, yes, the presidential elections are something that everybody's thinking about. You see on TV each and every day, no matter what news broadcast is your preference. But I would go on to say that more so than that, local elections are what's going to be the most impactful in the lives of your community. And as Mayor Tuck also spoken to our statewide representatives, being that we are what you call a Dillon Rule state, which we have to be what happens in your localities come off of what's coming down from Richmond in General Assembly. Well, if things are going on in the General Assembly that you aren't aware of, that's going to significantly impact what we can do locally, people need to know about that. That's why you need to know who your representatives are in the General Assembly. You need to know who your city council members are, whether it's your district or as in Hampton is citywide, because that plays more of a impact on how your life will be overall. You know, moving forward, how you're going to impact your life in regards to some of the federal things that take place.
Look, that whole census thing is, but the serious part of it is that it's equivalent of $2,000 per individual per year for 10 years. So one person represents $20,000 to the community. And that money is what's for schools, it's for programs, it's for the elderly, it's for a number of different things. It's for mental health programs. All those things are impacted by your census count. And so, yeah, in seriousness, it's $20,000 per person over that 10-year period to be counted or not counted.
How much is that again? Say that number one more time.
$20,000 per person for that 10-year period, or it's $2,000 per person per year for 10 years. That's what that count or lack of a count is worth to each city. It also determines your representation in Congress, where they draw the lines and how many representatives you get. But the most important part is money, and we all need the money. It's not that we want to, spend it foolishly, but if you're saying we need to have school improvement, we need more teachers, we need more police officers, we need more public safety, whatever it is the need from the federal level, it comes based on the census. And of course, money from the federal, it's called, it goes down to the state, and sometimes it comes directly to us, but it's all based on population.
A question for all of you, I guess. We all know we need public safety. We know that law enforcement is key because it manages the civility of our society. We understand that. But what type of things has programs or conversations in your point, Coach Reamon, that you have done to bridge this gap of this relationship between law enforcement, protecting your community versus young people who are now put in this place of somewhat fear, of skepticism with what they see around the world? What type of programs have you set up in each of your cities to help bring that division of understanding and information between law enforcement and young people who are still trying to figure out their way of navigating that space?
Well, Coach, you still on mute, Coach.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. That's me, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I don't know if they're mandated or not in reference to the police, but they are part of 90% of my life might be within this education school system type of world. And so police is part of that with school, and then in all the functions that we are part of. So you get to know policemen in that sense. And in the community, you meet coaches, policemen who spend time with you, and you always bring them, make it personal. The people in your community or that represent your school or around you, to become a fan of, because they're so critical. They can say the same things you said. And so it's a delicate situation, whereas I don't think it's mandated, but there are policemen and that serve as security and or police at all facilities that I know of. And then in my community in itself, you get to know those policemen. You get to know them.
Yeah, and pretty much what I shared earlier about some of the initiatives that our new police, well, not new, anymore, 2 years into his term, his Chief Drew. And one of the things I didn't mention is that in each of our elementary schools, they have partnered up as a member, whether you're in the North District, Central District, South District branch of the force, they have members of the police department that have adopted an elementary school in which they go on and they volunteer at the school, read books, hang around during lunchtime, in active engagement with the students, where they just don't see them arresting somebody in the community or see them in enforcement mode. They're more in an engagement mode, just to let them know that there's another side to law enforcement. Our middle schools and high schools have always had school resource officers, but they've kind of shifted it to a point where they also provide some after school criminal justice clubs where students that are interested in law enforcement, interested in any, any criminal justice background, career, that those school resource officers would have a program where they could stay after school and just talk about it. So those are some of the programs that have taken place, in addition to, like I said, some of the athletic programs that has been initiated the past couple of years. And then I failed to mention that all of our officers and some other departments, directors and their departments, they participate in a poverty simulation day, which is a training in which they go through to get the experience of people who are living in impoverished situations go through, so that they can have a better understanding of what families deal with on a day-to-day basis in regards to how that impacts how they go on about their daily responsibilities. So these are some of the programs that have been in place the past couple of years to, like you say, navigate us through waters in between the law enforcement and the community.
I want to take a different tact, and I agree that we're trying to do some of the things, and I'm doing some of the things that Councilman Harris talked about. But I was at a march this past Friday afternoon, and one of the things that one of our assistant chiefs had a chance to speak, and he says that applications by African Americans for police positions should just be overflowing, and I don't think they are. And it seems to me that if you are concerned about policing in your community, why wouldn't you want to be a police officer, so that now you're inside and then you can tell either the other officer, hey, look, I know that guy, or I know that lady there, or hey, no, you don't want to police that way in this area. Let me go talk. It just helps because you have that familiarity, but we're not doing it. The other thing that we were looking at trying to do, and used to be, I guess, when a lot of your police officers were hometown people, was that the whole take-home card program was to have that officer in your neighborhood that oh, that's Officer so-and-so down there. So you had that relationship. The one thing I found was quite interesting. I have to smile about it because moving to this area, I wasn't fully familiar with the Adibi family, but they were big-time football players. And I think one of them, after he graduated from Virginia Tech, and I don't know if he had a pro career or not, but he came back and was a police officer for maybe 2 years. I mean, he was like 6'5", 6'6". I mean, he stood out.
Nathaniel.
But he left. I understand I think went to the State Highway Patrol or even with the FBI. But still, the fact that he came back to the community for that brief period of time. And I think that's how you change policing. It's individuals who care enough. Maybe it's a financial sacrifice, but I think they pay well. But to come back and say, look, I want to do this because I think it's the right thing to do to change the image of policing in my community.
And it's funny you say that because Coach Reamon has quite a few of his former athletes that are current officers here in Newport News right now.
Inshallah. And it's interesting that you said that because the rise in African American male summit that Newport News has and how law enforcement is a vital part of how students look at law enforcement. So Newport News in control with Marcus Williams, who's a former player, teacher, and Darren Ford, one of the teachers and administrators in Newport News. But the RISE program, it does a little bit of work, not a lot, but a little bit of work with dealing with the law enforcement.
No, I'm excited about the conversation we're able to have. As I mentioned before, Carl and I mean, we love the 757. I mean, we're born and raised in Hampton, and have been wanting to continue to give back, and all of you have been influential in helping motivate us and for us to try and bring resources, from our fields of professional fields and so on. But I think we've got a number of call to actions. I mean, there's the voting aspect, and I think we're able to get some awareness and education around that. There's some specific things I think both in Hampton and Newport News around boards and commissions and task force that are actually happening right now, but we've got to get our young people and young adults and parents and others for that matter engaged. And those things exist now for as actionable next steps to help influence. I mean, we got, there's policing, there's racism, there's a number of things that we have to tackle, but for us to not be overwhelmed, whatever lane that individual has of their talents, we could tap into that. I think it sounds like both Hampton and Newport News has that. And hopefully for the coaches that are watching, other coaches and parents, there's opportunities for you to talk to your young people about some of these things, and as well as being a coach and mentor, not in a team standpoint, but coach and mentor by just being in the community. So we really appreciate the time that all of you were able to share. And hopefully this will be not necessarily this forum, but on a go forward basis for other programs and things that we could do to help engage our communities and stay connected.
Also, I'd like to say in closing, I want to thank each and every one of you tonight for sharing your time. Vernon and I respect who you are, what you do, and your purpose for your life. And in saying that, we want to let you know, even though we're not down there, okay, even though we don't live there, all right, please understand that we are resources for you. I know we little peas in the pod, okay? But in all seriousness, Vernon and I do this camp, and trust me, he and I speak a lot in different places all across the country, but there's no place like home for us. And it's a passion. And every year that I want to slow it down, something like this speeds me back up. And I want to say we're always going to be here for each and every one of you to support whatever initiatives you have, programs. So please extend that hand to us, and we'll be always available to support whatever you guys are doing in your match. So thank you so much, Mayor Tuck, Councilman Harris, and obviously Coach Tommy Reamon. Senior, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We greatly appreciate it.
Super.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
I want to thank you guys as well for all you do. I know you say you don't live here anymore, but the things you guys do around here is you do a lot, just as much as some of the people who do live here. So thank you for coming every year and doing all you do for all of the young people here in Hampton, Newport News, and beyond, because you guys have impacted a great deal of people, and one of those are including myself.
Super. I just want to thank you as well for what you do in our community, and looking forward. I think on your website, you're still talking about coming down here on the 9th of July and doing some things. So we're hoping that we'll be in phase 3 and we'll be able to have regular operations so we can have a successful experience for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
All right, take care.
All righty.
Take care. Good night.
Okay, good night.
All righty, good night.